Well, so good morning, everyone. And on behalf of the Institute of Contemporary Studies, Bangalore, the Chennai Centre for China Studies, and the Press Institute of India, this is Sashi Naya from Chennai, extending to all of you a very warm welcome. I am particularly delighted to welcome Ambassador Gautam Bambawale, who so readily agreed to be a part of today's program. So thank you very much, Ambassador, for being here. It's a pleasure to have you. And incidentally, this program today is the last of the four-part series that we started in September, one every month. Today, of course, will be a more detailed look at the media landscape in China, the flow of information there, the controlled information that is disseminated and how it impacts the world, so to speak. I must point out for the benefit of the ambassador that the first program we had in September was a sort of curtain raiser which looked at various aspects of the Deciphering China landscape. The second was a more focused look at cybersecurity and cyber capabilities of China and how India could counter that. And we had an expert crack cyber security team spread over Bombay, Singapore, and Bangalore who participated in that. Some of the videos are available on YouTube. And the last one we had in November was a very, very detailed look at the maritime situation, the maritime context, as we termed it. It was a 2-day program packed from morning to evening, which had a fairly good attendance with experts and senior journalists participating. And bringing up the rear, but of course, last but not the least, is the media, which is a very important aspect of relations between countries. And with China, it of course assumes particular importance. So we are very happy that you are here and kickstarting today's program with your keynote address. For the benefit of those who might not know Ambassador Gautam Bambawale, let me briefly introduce him to you. Gautam grew up in Pune and studied at the Bishop School and the Ferguson College. He obtained a master's degree in economics from the Gokhale Institute of Politics and Economics. He joined the Indian Foreign Service in August 1984 and worked in the Indian Foreign Service for 34 years between 1984 and 2018. He has been India's ambassador to Bhutan, Pakistan, and China. He has headed the Indian Cultural Center in Berlin. He was stationed in Washington, D.C. during the Indo-US nuclear deal. He has also worked at the Prime Minister's office. But significantly for today's program, we must note that he has had 17 years of experience dealing with China in various capacities, and he's considered an expert on China. Ambassador Bambawale is fluent in Chinese and German. He has an MPhil in economics from the Gokhale Institute of Politics and Economics in Pune. So we look forward to your keynote address. Ambassador, over to you.
Thank you very much. And let me start by saying that it's a great pleasure to be with all of you, whether you're in Bangalore or in Chennai or in Kerala. I can see a former colleague of mine, Mr. Muralidharan Nair. He is in Kerala somewhere or anywhere in India or other parts of the world, because these days our technology is such that there are people joining in from all parts of the globe. So let me start by saying it's a great pleasure to be with all of you. I'm so happy to be able to participate in your series of 4 monthly programs on deciphering China. And as I was saying earlier to some of my friends here, that it's a great pleasure to see that China studies is now beginning to move outside Delhi. It is, Delhi used to be the center for China studies for many years, maybe even decades, but increasingly as this subject becomes increasingly important, it is also very necessary for people in other cities, other parts of India, whether in north, east, south, west, to do China watching, to understand China and contribute their understanding to the national mainstream. So I'm very, very happy to be participating in this particular program. Now, today's session is mainly about media, reading between the lines. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk a little bit about the media and how it's organized in China. But I think you also have a whole day of inputs from other experts who will go into greater detail. So I'm going to just spend a few minutes on that. And then I'm going to turn to the main question of the day, which is deciphering what China is wanting to signal to India through its military actions in Ladakh. So let me just start by talking a little bit about the media and then turn to the question of how we decipher China's actions in eastern Ladakh. Now, as all of you know, communist parties across the world, whether it was in the Soviet Union earlier or China now, and also in some other countries like North Korea, for example, they place a lot of importance on the message which is going out from the country, from the government of these countries. So, built into this communist system is a whole series of actions to control the message which is being delivered from the country and from the government. And therefore, as you can imagine, there is a great control of the media in any communist country, and that is true in China also. Now, as all of you know, that the Chinese Communist Party and other communist parties, previously the Communist Party of the Soviet Union, for example, have a very important section of the party which used to be referred to as the propaganda department. These days, because propaganda has a negative connotation, the term has been changed to publicity department. But the Central Committee of the Communist Party of China has a very important part of it, which is called the propaganda, used to be called the propaganda department, now called the publicity department, through which the media in China is controlled and controlled very, very tightly. This is not just the print media. The print media is indeed very tightly controlled, and that has been done over the past 70 years since the existence of the People's Republic of China. But increasingly, we find that even new media, such as social media, is something which the Communist Party feels the need to control and feels the need to monitor. So this is all done through the propaganda department or the publicity department of the Communist Party of China. Now, very often, for example, and I'll give you an example here, say, for example, that the foreign minister of China, Mr. Wang Yi, is visiting, say, India. Now, all the information about his visit is strictly controlled and put out by the embassy after clearance at the topmost levels. That is, Mr. Wang Yi himself will take a look at what is being put out, and it is a completely well-written piece which is then handed over to Xinhua, the New China News Agency. It is put out by Xinhua, which is another arm of the Communist Party also. And then the rest of the media in China picks that up and repeats exactly what has been put out by Xinhua. So in this way, there is a very strict control of the message that is going out from the government of China. And I think all of you know that. And you're going to be studying this in greater detail and looking at it in greater detail as we go ahead. Now, as far as social media is concerned, of course, this is much more loosely organized in any country, including in China, where individuals now have a voice to state their own views, to state their own opinions, and therefore controlling social media is much more difficult. But what the Communist Party of China does is that it has control over the technological tools. So, for example, if there could be a particular word if that word appears in any post on the social media, automatically it gets deleted. So, for example, if the Communist Party wants the word Tibet to be controlled, anything that you write about Tibet within China will automatically get deleted, and through that, they're able to control even the social media. Uh, and I must point out that the Chinese Communist Party, the publicity department, spends enormous resources in order to monitor the social media and to monitor what people are thinking and saying and writing and doing. So this is how the Chinese have absolute control over the media. I find that a lot of people in India keep quoting a newspaper in China called the Global Times. Now, I know why they do that, because that is one of the few newspapers which is available in English. And therefore, that becomes the only resource for people in India who do not want to either um, take a look at the more detailed Chinese versions, or who don't have the ability to read the Chinese version. So it becomes very easy to just look at the Global Times and to quote it. But the very fact that this is happening has been noted in China. And that's why the Global Times is used as a conduit for sending certain messages which the government of China wants to send to India. And the Global Times has now assumed that kind of role in the entire media sphere, in the entire media scape in China. So I think we have to keep this in mind. And therefore, I have been arguing that it is absolutely essential for more people in India, whether in academia, whether in think tanks, whether people like us, to understand and learn the Chinese language and to go to Chinese sources of information rather than, say, a source like the Global Times. So I'm going to just end my remarks on the media on this note. I know that you are going to be discussing a lot more about how the media is controlled, monitored, etc., in China during the course of your day. But I'm going to stop there. But I'm going to move to the other topic which I wanted to cover in my opening remarks, which is what exactly is China trying to tell us through its military actions in Eastern Ladakh. And there I have some strong opinions and views which I would be very happy to share with all of you. So, the first point I'd like to make is that when you have to move troops in the numbers that there are in Eastern Ladakh, obviously the movement, the action has to be well planned and well executed. So, this is not a situation which has happened in the past where stray patrols of a few, of a few soldiers on each side come accidentally face to face with each other because they're patrolling the same areas. This is a totally different kettle of fish. This is something which is planned, which is premeditated, and we have to start from there in our analysis of what exactly the Chinese are trying to do and what they're trying to message to India through their military actions in Eastern Ladakh. So a lot of people in India ask, why are the Chinese doing what they're doing in Eastern Ladakh? And our External Affairs Minister, Dr. Jaishankar, has already said in public that the Chinese have given us at least 5 separate reasons for what they're doing in Eastern Ladakh. And observers, analysts in India have also spoken about those reasons. Some of those reasons are they have been very worried by the road building activities of India, which actually is a reaction to what they have already achieved and already done on infrastructure development on their side of the border. And we are only playing catch up. So it's strange that they should find it alarming that India is building roads, whether it's the DBO Shayok road, etc. But one of the factors is India's infrastructure development in our border areas, including road building, of course. The second point which is made is that this is a reaction to the changes India has made domestically, internally, as far as the governance of the erstwhile state of Jammu and Kashmir is concerned, or the current Union Territory of Jammu and Kashmir and the Union Territory of Ladakh. So one of the points being made is that this is a reaction to these changes which we effected in August of 2019. And that there is a collusion between China and Pakistan in their reactions to this change that we have brought about. And that may very well be true. Uh, there is a certain probability which can be attached to this as a factor or a reason for China undertaking what it has done since April, May of 2020 in eastern Ladakh on the military side. There's a third argument which is made, which is that China is reacting to the fact that India is getting closer to the United States as far as the Indo-Pacific is concerned, as far as the Quad is concerned, as far as military and other cooperation is concerned. And therefore, this activity that they have undertaken, this military action that they've undertaken, is a reaction to that. Once again, I find that a strange argument for the simple reason that when you analyze what is the upshot of the Chinese actions in eastern Ladakh, the result is that China has estranged India even further and has actually driven India even closer to the United States as a result of its actions on the ground in military terms. So I find this a little strange, but it's one of many reasons which is also being put forward. So the point I'm trying to make is that there are many reasons which are being and many factors which are being put forth by analysts and observers in India as to why China has undertaken this action. But I myself would like to argue that, the reasons are not really important. It could be any or all of these. It could be a mixture of some of these factors. But I think what is more important is to analyze what China has done on the ground and what they're trying to convey to India by taking the military action that they have done in eastern Ladakh. And let me come to that. In my view, that there is both a tactical implication as well as a strategic implication of what China's attempted military coercion in eastern Ladakh conveys to us in India. And indeed, I will argue it conveys to the rest of Asia and to the rest of the world also. So on the tactical side, what the Chinese are trying to convey to us is that they can, through military action and military coercion, unilaterally decide and define the line of actual control between India and China, or even the boundary between India and China. So I think this is a tactical message which they're sending us, that if we don't play ball and if we don't quickly settle the boundary between our two countries, there is this option for China to do it unilaterally. And of course, that is completely unacceptable to India because any boundary cannot be drawn unilaterally. It has to be done through negotiations, discussions between the two sovereign states which are involved. So this is one of the implications on the tactical side. The implications on the strategic side are even more far-reaching. And what China is signaling through this military action in eastern Ladakh is that there is a huge asymmetry of power, a huge asymmetry of economic power, a huge asymmetry of military power, and a huge asymmetry of comprehensive national power between India and China. And that India must accept this asymmetry and must accept a pecking order in Asia where China is the number one power of Asia. So basically, China is trying to imply that India needs to understand its place in the hierarchy of nations in Asia, and that India has a much lower place or a much more subservient place in the hierarchy of nations, at least in Asia, if not the world as a whole. So this is, I think these implications, which are strategic, are much more important as far as the moves by China in eastern Ladakh are concerned. And naturally, just as we couldn't accept the tactical implications, we cannot accept the strategic implications that India has to be a subservient power or be in a subservient role where Asia and Asian politics is concerned, where geopolitics in Asia is concerned. So, how does India react? Now, India can react in the long term, or let's say over a longer period of time, say 10 years or 12 years or 15 years, by trying to reduce the economic asymmetry between India and China. And therefore, our government needs to ensure that India's GDP grows at something like 6, 7, 8% per annum. And only if China's GDP growth slows a bit, which there are every signs of it doing and every likelihood of happening, then the asymmetry, economic and consequently military asymmetry will reduce. So this is in a longer time frame of 10 years or 12 years. And therefore, some of the steps taken by the government, like the PLI measure, which serves to bring in more foreign industry and FDI into India, is something which is welcome, because this whole question of make in India is very, very important as far as reducing economic and military asymmetry between India and China is concerned. But in the shorter term, we need to work with partners across the world in building coalitions, if you want to call it. I know the word alliance is used very sparingly in India, and there are implications of that. But definitely, India needs to build coalitions which will aim at balancing China and the rise of China, not only in Asia, but in the world at large. And there we need to work much closer with countries like the United States, Japan, Australia, even Southeast Asia, Western Europe, in building coalitions which will help balance China in the short term, which gives India the time to reduce the economic asymmetry in the longer term, which we have been talking about. And here I would like to make one point that, in India, we have always spoken about strategic autonomy. We have always spoken about, at one point, non-alignment. But at this point of time, when we need to build balancing coalitions with other groups of countries, other democracies, other countries which may not be democracies, like Vietnam, let this not become a holy cow. Let strategic autonomy not become a holy cow, which stops India from promoting its own national interests and protecting its own national interests. So the main point I would like to make to all of you here is that, yes, in the long term, strategic autonomy, India is a big country, it will have its own policy, is true. There's no doubt about that. But in the shorter term, in order to build coalitions with other countries, balancing coalitions which will help to balance out the strength of China, of a rising and very powerful China, we need to get over this holy cow that we used to call non-alignment, or now we call strategic autonomy. And there have been examples in Indian history where we have built such coalitions. I don't want to go into that, but I'll end by making this point that I hope that all of you will agree that in the short term, we need to build these balancing coalitions so that we can stave off the challenge of a rising China, of a powerful China. And in order to do that, we must not make strategic autonomy a holy cow, which will prevent us from doing exactly what we need to do to protect and promote our national interests. So I'm going to stop there. I think I've spoken long enough, 15 or 20 minutes that you had allotted me. And I'll hand the floor back to you, Mr. Nair. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. That was, I found some, I mean, we all found certain points you made very interesting, especially the aspect of controlling even social media in China, using technological tools, as you mentioned, and also the importance of learning the Chinese language for some of us who are interested and looking at how they portray and what their ideas are. Also about the military action in Ladakh, you mentioned both the tactical and the strategic aspects, whether it's they're wanting to set the border unilaterally, or are they trying to show India its place as such? And then you tied it up with the very important aspect of India's need to look at the economy, of increasing the GDP, etc., and also the importance of building coalitions. So very, very interesting points made the ambassador. Thank you very much. If before I ask Mr. Heblika to come in, I was just wondering, Ambassador, would you be open to taking a couple of questions? No?
Of course, of course, of course. How can we have a discussion without questions?
Yeah.
I'll be
So,
happy.
okay, yeah,
If there
all
are
right.
questions.
Because
And
we have some time.
including disagreements with my thesis.
All right. Because so I will open the floor. If anyone could unmute and ask the ambassador directly, that would be easy.
Ambassador, let me set the ball rolling. Commodore Vasan here. And, this is regarding the alliances and the importance of that, which I think has to be understood in its totality. But there are always fears, like you correctly said, about, this word that people are hesitant to use, the so-called strategic autonomy or non-aligned movement or whatever you want to call it. So in this phase, how do we bring about greater awareness in the political circles and also amongst the public about the need for such coalitions? So we've been talking about it, but I don't see, even for the Quad, there was a lot of reluctance in even accepting Australia, which had shown a lot of interest. Despite its size and asymmetry with China, it showed such great, inclination to be part of Quad and anything else. How do we bring about this change?
Yeah, no, that's thank you, Commodore, for an excellent question. It's actually a $1 billion question. But I believe that, in a country like India, a democracy, it's important for increasingly larger number of people to write about it, to talk about it, to explain it. And if you, I didn't want to go down the historical route, but if you go down history and look at what happened in 1971, you can see that by entering into the agreement with the then Soviet Union, we did exactly what people would call today building balancing coalitions. So I think there have been instances in India's history where we have not let non-alignment or strategic autonomy become a holy cow or a shibboleth which hangs around our neck, and we have promoted our national interests by doing that. So there have been instances in history. We need to point it out. I think more of us need to be talking about it and writing about it, because I do believe that the authorities, the people in power, do take a look at such writings and such voices, such opinions while drawing up policy. So I would say that that is the way to go about it. I agree that that may be a slow route to decision making, but then in a democracy, sometimes you have to take this kind of route to a decision, because then you have a final decision which sticks, and you don't have people coming out on the streets to protest it. So I believe that that is how we should go, and I would urge all of you in Bangalore and Chennai to consider it, and if you agree, then to write more about this aspect of India's decision making and policy making. Thank you very much for a very interesting question.
Thank you, Ambassador. Yeah, thanks. Mr. Srinivasan, Mr. Raghavan Srinivasan, I see you raised your hand. Welcome. Yes. Good morning. Very nice to have you here. Please ask your question. Please ask.
Yes. Ambassador, as a business journalist, I tend to look at the geo-economic strategy first and the geopolitical strategy a little later. And if you look at the geo-economic strategy that India has been following, at least for the last decade and a half, non-alignment has been dead and buried. India has very clearly aligned itself with the, G7, the G20, at the WTO negotiations, the developing nations were dismayed by what they felt was India's betrayal of their cause. So in that sense, that has not held us back, in any concept of non-alignment or even, India's earlier dearly held position as a champion of the global south, that has not deterred us from pursuing our interest, national interest, if I may put it that way, when it comes to economic diplomacy. Why is it that in the strategic area we seem to be still hanging on to the earlier belief?
Yeah, that's a very interesting point that you make, Mr. Raghavan, Mr. Srinivasan. And let me say that what you're arguing is true. I mean, there is no doubt about the fact that where geoeconomics is concerned, India has played to its own national interests and it's to promote its own national interest. But somehow in geopolitics, there is a bit of difficulty, a bit of reticence, a bit of hanging back in building coalitions with other countries. No one wants to call it an alliance because everyone feels that that is something that we, as a big nation, should not be doing, and that alliances also hedge our decision-making capability and capacity. But I think the facts on the ground are such that we need to get over this sort of hang up, if you want to call it that, because the need of the hour, at least in the short term, is to build such balancing coalitions, because there is no doubt that China is a big military and economic power, and if you use GDP as a rough measure to measure this power, they are at a $14 trillion economy. India is at a $3 trillion economy. So that shows you the asymmetry between us at a very rough and ready level. And I think it is essential that we need to, go beyond these issues, which should not become, they should not become holy cows to which we are wedded when that doesn't meet our national interests. And as you have rightly pointed out, in the economics of the world, we have promoted our national interests through taking decisions which may not have been part of the global south or the viewpoint of the global south. So I do hope that that sort of thinking permeates into geopolitics as well.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. Commodore Venugopal, you have a question. I see your raised hand. Are you there?
Yes, I am here. Thank you, Ambassador, for a very comprehensive presentation on, your take on China. My question is with respect to India's, active role in Quad when it comes to actually this is all what's happening now is just the talks. Nobody is even mentioning China in their narrative. What do you think will be India's take when it finally comes to taking a call? Whether we're going to be active or we're going to remain as a bystander?
No, I think even if no mention is made about China, I think there is very little doubt that the Quad is a counterbalancing coalition, if you want to use that word, against China. If China does things which are not acceptable to the four countries and to the rest of the world, then this particular coalition is going to take action. And I don't think India is going to be found wanting. I think India is actually in the vanguard of this movement. Of course, it is the United States, the preeminent power of the world, which is leading the Quad. But I don't think India is going to be found wanting on that. And one of the reasons for that is because by taking the action that China has done in Eastern Ladakh, China has already exhibited what kind of relationship it wants with India. It doesn't want a steady, balanced, forward-looking relationship. It wants an unsteady, distant, competitive relationship with India. It wants to show India its place. And I think irrespective of whether a resolution to the current standoff in Eastern Ladakh is found, and even if the Chinese military forces are to restore status quo ante as in April 2020, there is no way that India can not change or reset its policy towards China. that will be silly and stupid, because we have to draw our conclusions from what the Chinese have done militarily this summer. And therefore, I am led to believe that India will not be found wanting in the Quad or any other counterbalancing coalition, whether it's a group of 10 democracies, as some people have been arguing. India will very much be a part of it. So I believe that, through some military action to gain maybe some tactical advantage on the ground, China, by its actions in eastern Ladakh, has lost India strategically. And I think the rest of the world knows that. The United States and Japan definitely know that. I suspect even the Russians are beginning to see that. And so you can see some of their statements. For us, it is very important to keep Russia on our side. And that is going to be a big challenge for Indian diplomacy and for the government of India in the coming months and coming years. But it's very important for us to keep Russia on our side and not have it in a coalition with China. So these are some of the implications of your question, Commodore, and I hope I have been as undiplomatic as I can be. Since I'm retired, I can afford to be undiplomatic, which I've been in ample measure. So thank you very much for an excellent question.
Thank you, Ambassador. You've answered me very well. Thank you.
Shashi, can I ask a question?
No. In order, Colonel, just hold on. General Bajwa, you have one, I think. You raised your hand earlier. We just go in order.
Yeah, thank you. Jai Hind and Pranam to everybody. Thank you very much, Ambassador, for a lovely presentation. My question is that day before yesterday, the Americans passed a bill, the Congress passed a bill called the Tibetan Policy and Support Act 2020. Why are we as a country shy to call the India-China border as the India-Tibet border? And why do we not continue to project that it is an issue between India and Tibet, which the Chinese are encroaching on, and we would give credence more to Tibet rather than China? And we must start actually taking them on this issue. There is only one person I know who's been writing a lot on this, Claude RP. He has brought this out in 4 volumes that he has just produced from under the USI. Very well researched volumes. And we are not taking on this issue. Why are we so hesitant? And I'm very glad that we continue to call the ITBP and not change it to Border Security Force Mountains or something. Indo-Tibetan Border Police, and our interaction should be that we keep talking Tibet and let China keep explaining that Tibet is part of China. Why should we explain for them? Thank you.
Yeah. No, that's an interesting viewpoint, and I think it's a very logical viewpoint. But unfortunately, way back in the 50s, we have accepted that Tibet is a part of the territory of the People's Republic of China. And that was reiterated in several instances in even the recent past. So I don't think there is any problem in calling the Indo-Tibetan Border Police the Indo-Tibetan Border Police. There is no problem in not calling it the India-Tibet border and calling it the India-China border, because we have accepted that position. But I think what is more important, and you're not wrong there, is the actions that we take. So actions to support and shore up the Dalai Lama and his followers in India. Actions to support the so-called Tibetan government in exile, which of course we call by other names. I think that is more important. So we need to take actions which support our friends in Tibet, and that will speak louder than any nomenclature changes that may be made. So I believe that is what we need to do. And to just take that forward to its logical conclusion, I believe this is the time for India to absolutely strengthen its linkages with Taiwan. In fact, economically, we will benefit hugely if we enter into a free trade agreement or a comprehensive economic cooperation agreement with Taiwan, because there are great synergies between India's economy and the Taiwanese economy. Even now, many of you know that under the PLI scheme in the telecom sector, it is the Taiwanese companies like Foxconn, Wistron, Pegatron, which manufacture for Apple, who have now moved their production to India. Some of them have had some problems, but that's a different aspect. But I think this is the time to really strengthen our linkages with Taiwan, including on the side of understanding and deciphering China, which is your main theme in your four activities that you've undertaken. So if you want to decipher China, I think the Taiwanese can help us in understanding and deciphering China. And we need to increase these linkages with Taiwan, and definitely on the economic side, which is much more consequential, because we must remember that one of our objectives should be to reduce the asymmetry, both in economics and on the military side, between India and China. So the Taiwanese can help us in reaching that goal, and we should utilize this and leverage this kind of relationship and partnership to its fullest extent.
Thank you. I just add another point that we did a very right move, I think, in having utilized the Vikasis, who are part of the SFF, and conveyed to the Chinese that, well, we are doing something about these people also. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. I agree with you entirely there. And there, our actions spoke louder than any words.
True. Very true.
Itself has sent a message which is very, very loud and very, very clear. So my argument is that take more such actions rather than making seminal changes, nomenclature changes, which really don't mean much. So I completely agree with you, General Bajwa.
Thanks, General Bajwa. Colonel Hariharan, you there?
Hariharan here. Ambassador, I have one question. That is, are we constrained in our actions because we share a land border, unlike a very long land border, undefined by both sides, or rather where there is a dispute? Don't you think that border dispute is germane to the whole issue? We have made the maps, given them to the Chinese. Chinese are not responded. Can't we have a deadline and tell them that further border measures, what you call confidence building measures, cannot take place unless the Chinese give their survey maps or bring it to a boil? Why we hesitate that in this respect?
Yeah, no, that's a very thought-provoking question. Let me say that, yes, we have given maps, but, any boundary between two sovereign nation states has to be settled through negotiations and discussions between those two countries. And you're absolutely right that even where the line of actual control is, leave alone the boundary, the Chinese have stopped that process and they have not moved forward on it. Possibly because this undefined boundary, undefined LAC is a situation which is of benefit to them. Possibly. Now, the point is that unless we have the military power to back up a boundary that we project to the Chinese and say that, look, either you discuss it through negotiations, and if you don't, then we will just make this a de facto boundary. We don't have that kind of military power at present. In fact, it's the Chinese who are doing that. And that's what I argued, that by their actions in Eastern Ladakh, they're trying to unilaterally define the line of actual control without any discussions with India, and which is completely, therefore, unacceptable to us. So you need to have the military power to back up, or if you want to use the word comprehensive power, to back up that kind of proposal by actually producing a fait accompli on the ground. And there, I think, is where we have a problem.
All right. So I think Mr. Heblika himself has a question. So I'll pass it on to Mr. Heblika for his question, and then I would request him to propose a vote of thanks.
Thank you and good morning, Ambassador Gautam. One question I just wanted to ask. It's always been something which interested me. While I understand that the government of India and its infrastructure is adequately prepared to look at the external threats to our national security, but what worries me is the states in the government in India today are the weakest links with our national security mechanism. How do the states get any knowledge of what China is doing, or is there a mechanism by which certain areas of concern are expressed to the state governments? For example, what happened in Wistrom factory in Karnataka is an example. 2 days after the incident, the Global Times comes up and says something,
Yes.
which leaves me to believe that there are more sinister designs at work. Why are MSMEs being targeted? Because they are going to be the growth engines for India's economic recovery. So, having been in the ministry and being in the PMO and having looked at it from outside, do you think that the internal mechanisms are strong enough to take care of these threats and challenges? That's my question.
Yeah, no, that's a very interesting question, and I don't know the answer to that question. But I agree with you entirely that in our national, efforts to protect India and to defend India, it's very important to take the state governments along. And today, when you talk about national security, as all of you know, it is more than just the land border. But even if we talk about the land border, there are so many states of India which are on the border with both Pakistan and China, and it is essential to take them along too. So I agree with your question. I agree with the drift of your question that we need to make certain organizational and institutional changes in India so that the state governments also have a say, not only in the defense of India, but also in making policy regarding defense, foreign affairs, international affairs, etc. So I couldn't agree with you more. But how to do that is a completely different ball game. It will take a whole day seminar by all three organizations, and that can be possibly a next subject and theme for all of you to consider. But it's going to be a long drawn out affair. So let me stop there. I confess and profess that I don't really have an answer to your question, but I couldn't agree on the importance of what you're saying and what you're asking.
So, thank you. Good morning, everyone, ladies and gentlemen who have joined us on this webinar today. Firstly, I would like to express our deep sense of gratitude to Ambassador Gautam Bambawale for having really consented to be with us today to deliver the keynote address. Having known him during the course of his service, I've always admired him for his plain thinking and the way in which he has gone about, disseminating the need to create more knowledge about China, not only in Delhi, but elsewhere. Secondly, I would like to also flag one point that he distributed his keynote address into 2 points: to deal with media and also to look at some of the issues that seem to dog India on the Indo-Tibet border of the western sector. I think the clarity, the cogency, and the fluency which he has sought to set the picture correctly is something that I was looking forward to, and I think I'm not disappointed. Like you rightly said, yes, the study of China needs to move away from Delhi. There are other centers that require to come into limelight, and I think we are moving in the right direction. And with people like him, expressing these views, I hope that we will be able to generate enough interest and also to have him back with us at a later stage. This is the concluding part of the 4-part webinar on China. I think I have learned much more than in the last 4 months about various issues, contemporary, past, and how the future looks like. And I think what the 3 NGOs, the 3 think tanks are doing is to look at the present and the future and relying a lot on what happened in the past. So in that manner, I think we have achieved substantial success, and I'm sure that we have a long road, long journey ahead. With these few words, I would like to thank Ambassador Bambawale on my behalf, the behalf of my institute and the co-hosts for being with us today and for having shared his views on a subject which is of national importance and which we need to know more and as the subject unveils itself. Thank you very much for being with us, and we hope that we will have you back again very soon. Thank you. Have a good day.